Okay, am I live? I am live. Hello everybody, welcome to the Clockwork Gamedev Show. My name is Keith Burgun. Let's turn this music down here. We are listening to the Business Demons music from Gem Wizard's Tactics. I will fade it out gracefully here. Look at that. So yeah, welcome to the Clockwork Gamedev Show. I tried that thing where you start the show before it starts, kind of like you start running the stream, hopefully to get people in the room before, so that I don't have to wait, so I don't know, in theory that works good. I'll try to work on that a little bit more as I go forward. So today we're going to do a couple different things. We're going to talk about news segments. We're going to start off with that, and then we're going to talk about this will be the topic of the day. People want to believe that their game is fair, but in reality, they want it to privilege them. And because I think there's something in there, and there's something in there worth talking about from a strategy game design perspective, even though on a level this kind of can't be true of strategy games entirely. But I think there's still something in there that is actually something I struggle with Gem Wizards as well. And so we'll talk about that as well. But yeah, trying to make it into more of a variety kind of show. So let's talk about a couple of news things first, and maybe people have some comments and thoughts and things like that. Today there was the news of Microsoft acquiring Bethesda. My first take on this, because I saw this tweet about somebody saying we're so excited to join the Microsoft family, and my feeling is just this idea of what's it called? By the way, why is my ad blocker not working on this browser? Anyway, the idea of referring to these giant business deals as a sort of a joining of a family, this humanizing of these massive faceless corporations is weird, and you shouldn't engage in it. And if people haven't watched the Neo Yokio Christmas special, I highly recommend it. But there's a character called Bergdorf-chan, who is this cute anime girl that's the stand-in for the CEO that does all the firing and stuff, and it acts all sad that it has to fire people, and it's very good. But anyways, so yeah, the specifics of this situation here. I'm not a big Bethesda fan as a developer, but as a publisher, they own the rights to a bunch of different companies, including id Software. And so, yeah, the first thing that I thought about with this was because Microsoft has also bought, I think, In Exile and also Obsidian. And so at this point, the Microsoft owns all the RPGs. I guess they don't own BioWare, but all the big time RPGs, they really they seem to be almost focused on that, but I'm not really sure about their other acquisitions, so I'm not really sure. But anyway, Microsoft is kind of the RPG company now at this point. I mean, they already sort of were. Their games will be coming to Game Pass. Of course, their games I don't care about because they're terrible, but I am interested a little bit in some of the other games. So if the new Dooms come to Game Pass, I would screw around with that. Yeah, casting corporations as families is also a big union busting tactic. I'm actually not sure about that. That wouldn't surprise me, but I'm not aware of that. Maybe you can speak more to that. It doesn't surprise me. I think in general the campaign to humanize these businesses definitely is part of an effort to sort of abdicate their responsibility. It's weird, actually. They do both things, right? They both try to make it this faceless entity that exists in the ether. It's well, this is just what the company is doing. The company is blah, blah, blah. And it's there's some human being who actually made the decisions here. And at the same time, they try to humanize it and yeah, I guess I could see how it could be anti-union, and that unions tend to oppose that sort of create a sense of opposition and what's the word, conflict with business. And so if you're trying to cast them as oh, we're just a family run business, we're just it's this cute nice little thing. That's the strategy they used to stop unionization here at Hampshire in the 90s. Okay, yeah. No, it doesn't. We don't need to get the union involved. We can work this out together. Right, exactly. Yeah, we'll investigate ourselves. How's that sound? So yeah, I don't have a lot of feelings about this, to be honest. Like, other than this is the end result of, you know, just sort of like unfettered capitalism, is that like you just get these companies buying each other up and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And yeah, it's not the least bit surprising. I like to take every opportunity I can to say that Bethesda's games are bad. I'm sort of curious if like Morrowind or even Daggerfall would come to. I doubt Daggerfall, because I think Daggerfall you actually have to run in DOSBox, but Morrowind might come to the Game Pass. Yeah, I don't know. The key point is we're still Bethesda. Yes, that is the key point, indeed. Hey, Pete Potato. Potato, how's it going? There has been some. This also reminds me, because there was a lot of talk about the other companies, Obsidian and In Exile. They were purchased by Microsoft a few years back, and so there was some kind of question as to how that would affect their design, the ways that they would design games and stuff. And it's sort of hard to say. I mean, Outer Worlds, in my opinion, does kind of seem more like the kind of game you would make if you were kind of like selling out, right? Because it's like very Oblivion-esque. It's very like Elder Scrolls-ish. But at the same time, I think they made Pillars of Eternity 2 after that merger. I'm not sure. I can't remember now. The sale also included Arcane, which makes great games, especially for being AAA. Hopefully Microsoft lets them keep doing their thing. Yeah, that's always like the question. I mean, I think it can't be a good thing. Like, they always try to like frame these like, oh no, we got bought by blankety blank and this time it's going to be good. It's like never good. It's always bad. And maybe it's just bad in a way that takes a few more years to figure out how it was bad. Like, because it's good in that, like, hey, you have more money, you have more resources, but it's like, you know, I think it inevitably means that there's pressures on you now from above that are anti-experimentation, anti-exploration. You know, we talked about like the project. These companies, if let's put it this way, if I owned a company, you know, and I was really concerned about my bottom line, which big enough companies kind of have to be by their design, then I'm not sure I would want people doing the project stuff underneath me either. Arcane's next game is PS5 exclusive, but now they're owned by Xbox. I don't know. Who's Arcane? I don't look them up. It sounds familiar. Oh, this. Good old this. Oh, Ryu from Street Fighter games. Oh, okay. Oh, Dishonored? I thought that was by Bethesda. I see. It was like published by Bethesda. That explains why I've heard non-zero people saying that Dishonored was actually worth playing. I never played Prey. Actually, wasn't there an older game called Prey also from like the 2000s? Or was that the same one? Oh my god, I know Arx Fatalis. They made Arx Fatalis? See, Arx Fatalis actually is a project game. Oh, you can't click these links? Is that how this works? Oh, this just doesn't have a game site, I bet you. Yeah, anyway, no one knows about Arx Fatalis. Of course, that's the only one I know about. But Arx Fatalis was like Ultima Underworld or something. It was this entirely under the ground dungeon exploring game, but it was like weirdly interactive. Yeah, Arx Fatalis was actually... So if these guys made this, then yeah, I agree with you. Kind of interesting stuff. Maybe I should check out their other games. That's probably a good idea. But yeah, I recommend checking out Arx Fatalis. So anyway, yeah, that's this whole news, quote unquote. Excited about Deathloop. I don't know what that is. Haven't heard of that. Time loop mechanic. Okay. Darl Messia is pretty sweet. It's pretty similar to Shady Knight. Oh, yeah. Oh, cool. Nice. Yeah, Shady Knight was very interesting and promising. Let id Software make a Halo game, you cowards. Well, like, but Halo is now. Do they own? Oh, right, they do own Halo because they own Bungie, I guess. Yeah, sure. Why not? Who cares? Does it really matter who makes the next Halo game? The first Prey was actually pretty creative and interesting. Okay, yeah. When did the first Prey come out? Because I remember there being a game 2017. That's not the one. I feel like there's another game called Prey that was like in 2000 or something. 2006. Yeah, I think this is the one I was thinking of. Yeah, there's 2 games called Prey. I wonder if they're related at all. Oh, same game with unrelated with this. Weird. Okay. I mean, there's plenty of names you can name games, everybody. You don't have to name it the same thing. System Shock 3. Oh, wow. Cool. All right. Well, I'll have to check out Arcane's games then. I'll put that on my two playlists. In fact, here we go. We got the games to playlist here. I'm just going to write this somewhere here. Yeah, that works. I haven't updated this in a long time. A bunch of these I've already played. Okay, so that's a news item. What is this? Everything Sony announced at the PS5 event that happened a few days ago. I don't know. I don't have a lot of takes on this, to be honest with you. They're making another Final Fantasy. I'm interested for the music. And I always like their logo. Or the illustration with the logo. That's always good. What else was... Oh, Spider-Man. But it doesn't look like the Into the Spider-Verse. Not that I would care either way. There was one really interesting thing about this PS5 release. Oh, Deathloop. That's the thing that Steven was mentioning before. Overall, this is just like so... I mean, there's a Harry Potter game, which obviously is like... I mean, what are they going to do? They already have been making a Harry Potter game in the first place. I don't know. Yeah. There's a bunch of Call of Duty and Resident Evil and all Devil May Cry. It's PlayStation. It's PlayStation Plus One. I will have to check out Deathloop. A Demon's Souls, that's right. Yeah, Demon's Souls is coming. That's good because that was kind of locked into isolation on the PS3 along with a bunch of other games that I was interested in playing. Yeah. I mean, I on the one hand, I want to say bad timing for them. On the other hand, like the JKR stuff, the JK Rowling stuff has been happening now for like years at this point. And so it's a little bit like if they were to say like, oh, we didn't know, you know, it's like, come on. And I'm sure the game will sell just fine. In fact, some of this stuff is going to make the game sell even better because just any news is good news for marketing. Like I wouldn't even have known that this game existed if it weren't for what's going on with J.K. Rowling. Like, I mean, as a business thing, and that's one of the reasons we should be sort of skeptical of a lot of things related to how games are marketed and sold. You know, J.K. Rowling's whole thing is a pretty good business move overall. Probably everything she does in the next few years, I would think, will be at least as successful as if she hadn't done all that crap. And that's very unfortunate. The only thing that's interesting about the PS5 is that it's the only time that this new tech makes new things possible marketing line is actually true. How so? I would like to hear more about that. That sounds not true to me. By the way, I recently hung out with a friend and they showed me the Unreal 5 demo, which we talked about recently a little bit. You should say lots of controversial stuff then to sell Gem Wizards Tactics. Yeah, I probably should. I mean, I'm not going to say stuff that's like, you know, harmful to society. But yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. I mean, you know, we all know that like the way you get tweets and retweets is by saying controversial stuff. So absolutely, I should. It's just a matter of coming up with something that's controversial, but that also like I can defend on some level. The new super fast hard drive actually allows you. Okay, so yeah, I did want to say that the focus on load times is huge. To me, like, and especially playing these RPGs that I've been playing recently, like Pillars of Eternity 2. I like Pillars of Eternity 2. Honestly, one of my biggest reasons that I'm not playing it is the freaking load times are insane. They're like literally like 3 or 4 minute load times, and I'm doing this on a solid state drive with a pretty good hard drive. So like the load screen situation is completely out of control, and they're just a giant waste of time. Like that's actually one of the only like hype things I've ever heard that actually sounds good to me. Like all the graphics stuff, who cares? It doesn't matter. Loading screens are the only thing that I think I've heard that kind of matters. If for no other reason, then you can just like figure out that the game sucks faster and move on with your life. Let's see. Let's catch up with chat here. Yeah, the streaming content off the disc. It's a big part of why I'm making a game about punching space Nazis in the face with laser cannons. Yeah, that's good. I don't know. Have you told us about that game? You should post about that on the Discord. Instant fast travel would be nice. Yeah, sure. Ability to crash, reload the entire level instantly is really good. Yeah. Also for like toy-like games or for those computer RPGs, having instant quick load is a good thing. I didn't used to care about graphics, and then I started making them, and now I care. It's weird. Well, I care about graphics in terms of like I care about art, but I think you could make beautiful art on an NES or on any hardware at all, including a PS5 or Unreal 5 or whatever. I think that doesn't impact really. You can make great art with like just sand. You know what I mean? Like you can make great art with anything, and that's what matters. The hardware stuff, selling the hardware is like this big hype scam that they do every few years, and it doesn't change really the experience. What changes the experience is good design, whether it's good art. The UE5 demo. I mean, that's another example. I think, first of all, I'm skeptical that it'll be as good as it looks. It made this trailer, and we were kind of joking, like, what if they just like, just got all this funding as this big scam, and then they just were just like, oh yeah, it didn't work, sorry, or whatever. But I think that a lot of times, like, I feel like so many times throughout my life, I've had those experiences of like seeing some demo where it was like, oh my God, it looks so much like 10 times better than what we have now. And then like, cut to reality, and it's like, it's another somewhat marginal improvement. I mean, technology improves. There's no doubt about that. And I can appreciate the improvement of technology and the, design of new technologies. But I think that like, it's so like pornified in games, right? Like it's so like we're so detached, like so many levels out from like what our reaction should be to like new graphics technology. And so that's why I really just try to pull back a lot from it. Photorealism is not the holy grail, that's true, but there's something impressive about tackling technical constraints. Absolutely, and that's the thing. Like, if you're a programmer or someone who's like interested in graphics technology, I super understand being interested in that. But for a game player or a game designer, I don't think any of that stuff's going to change anything. It's just it doesn't matter. There are some technical things like I don't have to make LODs, things like that. But I mean, we have those kinds of like quality of life development things. Like we do those all the time, right? And it's great, but they're not revolutionary. It's evolutionary, I guess, is all I would say. And they always try to market it as revolutionary, and it's not. And nothing here is remotely revolutionary, in my opinion. It's all just, and I one thing I love about PlayStation is that they name their things just a number. PS5, great name. And great name because it's easy to keep track of and remember, and great name because it accurately portrays this as what it is, which is just like, yeah, the next one. You know? I do play games as a player and as a designer and an artist and tech nerd all at once. Sure. Yeah. And right. And many people who watch my streams are very invested in like techie stuff, and that makes sense. But these marketing campaigns are for, you know, like everybody, are for gamers. And so I think it's good to both recognize that hype sort of thing and also realize that, like, for a design perspective, it doesn't change anything. Yeah, so I don't know. I'm overall, I actually am surprised there isn't like anything. I would say overall, this is like a shockingly conservative launch in terms of software, right? Because it's all remakes, sequels. Like I guess there's the Deathloop thing. I don't know anything about that. So maybe that's the one thing that's like a new thing. But other than that, it's just like very, like I could have predicted, I could have written down all the things that would be in the PS5 thing before it launched, and I would have been like mostly right, pretty much. Okay. Yeah. So that's PS5. I also wanted to mention quickly about like the whole streaming thing that's happening. The not streaming, but the whole subscription model thing that's been happening a lot. Deathloops is Dishonored combined with Majora's Mask. Okay, that could be interesting. Yeah, but the whole what's it called, subscription models. I actually, for the first time in years, I thought about like maybe I would get one of these consoles, especially the new Xbox, where they have the subscription model, which is pretty affordable, and they have the really cheap Xbox. Well, cheap. It's like $300. And I was like, I could imagine paying $300 for one of these things and paying the subscription and then actually getting to play games, not having to pay $50, $60, $70 every single time I want to try a game. That would be, I could imagine doing that. So that's definitely like something I'm still maybe thinking about doing. I think this one's a little bit more, yeah, and the PC subscription, like I'm pretty happy with it. Part of it's just that like they happen to have, well, there are some games that are only on the console. That's why you would buy the console. At least I'm pretty sure that's true. And there's also some games that, like, even if they're on PC, I don't want to play some long Kojima cutscene game or whatever the fuck. Like Final Fantasy, I'm going to play that on a computer sitting upright. Some games you got to be like lying down on a couch, like, you know, like this, to like really kind of get into them. They're by their nature, they're so passive and they take so long, and there's these long cutscenes that are basically like movies that you have to watch all the time. Anyways, yeah, so let's get into the design part of the show. Imagine some design section. I need to make like a little After Effects movie that's like design section and like news section. That'd be really cool. I can do that. Okay. Anyways, you can play PC games from the couch. We have this technology. Can you? I mean, yeah, kind of. Wait, I thought Steam Link they got rid of. Do we have this technology, or are you just talking about like plugging your laptop to the freaking thing? And because that's like not practical, in my opinion. Especially because I have a cat, and if you plug in a laptop somewhere, it eats the power cable. Maybe when he gets older, that'll stop being a thing. All right, so let's talk about this thing. People want to believe that their game is fair. Steam Link app in some TVs. Huh, I'll have to check that out. People want to believe that their game is fair, but in reality, they want it to privilege them. You can use a Chromecast or something. Yeah, but that's laggy. Super laggy. Have you actually done this? Like, I've actually looked into this, and I tried using the Steam Link thing like 2 years ago. It was laggy as shit, and it crashed all the time. And then I heard that Steam got rid of the whole thing. Chromecast is going to be even laggier, I think. So I think maybe when you say you can just use your PC on a TV, maybe you mean like you can't. A very long HDMI cable. Yeah, you can do that for sure. 7 consoles I use my PC for, like, for playing Civ and Stellaris. Right. Okay. Yeah. Civ and Solaris are like PC games, so that makes sense to me. People want to believe that their game is fair, but they want to privilege it. They want it to privilege them. Right. Okay. And the person who said this is Herbivore, aka GLP, I think, in the Discord chat. Console is lying down games, exactly. Half asleep games. Yeah. Okay. So this was not meant to just directly apply to strategy games, but I do want to talk about this idea as it involves strategy games. So I think first of all, for like a lot of video games are just power fantasies. And so of course that's true, right? Because the power fantasy, in a power fantasy, that's how it works. Is that it's not an effective power fantasy if you don't get this sort of like veneer of fairness. Or even a veneer of, being an underdog. Right? So like in God of War, you fight this huge monster. It's like, look how big that monster is. Oh my God. And you're the underdog here, right? When of course you're not at all. That monster has like 2 moves. It's totally dumb. And it's like locked into some dumb AI pattern. Whereas you can like move around it. You can dodge. You have all the tools you need to beat it. You just have to you actually have to do a pretty simple series of movements and stuff in order to beat it. And so yeah, it's a veneer of challenge. Or like a challenge stylization. I mean, that's what a power fantasy is, right? Because it's not real power. Yeah. I mean, so like you could say like real power, as opposed to a fantasy power, would be that so like strategy games actually involve real power, not a power fantasy. They're an interaction, especially like a 2-player game. A 2-player game could be seen as a comparison of, power or strength or skill, etc. In Go, they often use the word strength. So like he's a very strong player. That was a very strong move. And in this sense, when someone beats someone else, and in contests too, strategy games and contests, yeah, I mean, strategy games are contests of decision making. A 2-player game could be seen as a comparison of power and some real thing, which is actually the determinative factor over who wins. Or, I don't know if that's the right word, but in who wins or something. Yeah. Right, and contests as well. And so whereas, these video games, typical AAA video games are often a mix of, a bunch of forms, toys, puzzles, even strategy elements, but with the, as well as narrative. But their overall thrust, their overall goal, their overall engine is one of power fantasy. I don't want to say fake. That's too value judgment-y. A performance. It's really a performance that you engage in. It's more like acting, right? In fact, I think that's probably the most fair way to think about something like God of War or one of those like video games. Is that it's a performance. It's like you're gonna play this role in a stage play of being Batman or being Gear of War angry man, army man, right? And so you're just going to kind of go through those motions and like, yeah, sure, maybe you can improvise a little bit, but pretty much like there's these beats that you have to do. You have like literally spots on the floor like actors do that you have to go to that trigger certain events. In this way, AAA video games are maybe most like are best thought of as like acting, doing a stage play. You're playing a role in a mostly fixed narrative, you know, in a sort of like power fantasy genre. Let's word this a little differently. Right. But there are real challenges in most AAA games. Isn't this just you being... Well, okay, so that's a really good question, too. Isn't this just you being good at games and therefore thinking that they're easy? Right, okay, so that's a really complicating and interesting factor. What's interesting here, too, is that, like, I have so little patience for these things now that, like, I think you actually could probably safely say at this point that I'm no longer good at them because I just can't apply emotional energy towards these problems. So like if you watch me play like one of these games, like I kind of like suck at them now because I find it so uninteresting. I'm just like, oh, okay, yeah, yeah. You know, like I just like play in a very lethargical way. I can't apply myself to them anymore because my brain is just so tunes out. But I definitely remember being a kid and being very invested in them. And yeah, some of them are hard. I mean, not that many of them these days are hard. Although, again, hard is also relative, right? So what's interesting here is there's some of this that's a matter of perspective. If you're a little kid, like if you're like 5 or something, or like, you know, like really a little kid, even some of these games that we would consider like, you know, this like stage play thing may in fact be a real challenge. As well as like you may have, you know, people have just different levels of ability. If this is your first time ever playing a video game, then it may be like a real sincere challenge. And that's an interesting thing that actually throws a lot of this, you know, into question. I mean, this is true for people like many of us here. But if you haven't played any video games before, trying to think of like what's a game that's easy. I don't know, God of War or like Batman, one of those Batman games or something. I'm trying to think of like what's a good example of one of those. It's hard to think of because they're all like that. What was that one with the like you're like an Indiana Jones or something game? That one seemed like it was pretty like, you know, QTE after QTE kind of. So here's what I would say. This is the tricky thing about these games. So obviously, like, I'm in favor of them having difficulty modes. Not all players have the same skill level. And so finding that point of, you know, just hard enough to create a veneer of challenge, as Steven said, is tricky. And so what we do is we have difficulty modes, but people don't always pick the right difficulty mode because they don't know what the right difficulty mode is for them. And sometimes, you know, sometimes the hard mode is actually like really hard. Sometimes the hard mode is actually really easy. Sometimes normal is hard. Sometimes normal is easy. It's like no one knows what these things mean. It's different in every game. And also people's skill level is vastly different. You know, so I think that maybe a dynamic, like a high speed dynamic difficulty thing would probably be best. Like, I don't know what if people have talked about this much, but like, you remember when Left 4 Dead came out and they were talking about the director AI? So, and this is, by the way, very distinct from what's it called? Single player ELO. I just want to make that clear off the top of the bat. But Left 4 Dead had this like single AI director concept, and I don't know why all games don't just use this. Behind the scenes, okay, so let me see. What's a good order to talk about this in? You know, some games, current solutions involve difficulty modes. Oops. Difficulty modes, which are problematic in that players don't know what difficulty they should select for themselves. And also because in picking the easy mode, you're kind of messing with the power fantasy. Right? Like, if you're saying, like, no, I'm picking easy mode, it's like, that screws with this veneer of fairness a little bit, right? So that's one issue. And then the other, another solution is, like, helper events. Something like New Super Mario Brothers, bubble mechanic. A lot of the new Mario Brothers games do like, you know, if you run into trouble, the game sort of helps you, or like skips an area, auto completes it, etc. This also messes with the power fantasy element, and that's less of a problem in something like Super Mario Brothers, where it's, I don't think that Super Mario Brothers actually is leaning on the power fantasy all that much. But it's still, you know, it's not really applicable to some of these kinds of games for that narrative reason. So the last way, and maybe there's other ways, let me know what you think. But I think that this is the way to go. I think all of these games should just do Left 4 Dead AI Director and secretly, quietly, adjust the difficulty dynamically as the player is playing, based on how, you know, good they're doing, right? So don't make a big deal out of it. And this is in fact how this is like how improv works, and how you know, even stage actors who have any like improvisation component will work, is that they will adjust accordingly, you know. So, or like how a D&D DM works, you know, things are going a little too easy on the players, so you kind of ramp up the difficulty. Maybe there's one more skeleton in the next encounter, things like that. And you don't make a big deal out of it. You don't mention that you're doing it, because again, you're trying to create a narrative here. And so I think that this is really the way to go. Like, this is the one we should do going forward for these kinds of, like, you know, fantasy, power fantasy games. Yeah. So let's see. Let's go back to our original statement here. Arma 3 has a system similar to the L4D AI director, but there's no AI in the AI. The director is another person. It works really well. Yeah, that's great. If you can have another person, that's awesome. Of course, that's very costly and not applicable, right? A lot of the times you just can't. You can't do that. But yeah, if you can have a human director, that's fantastic. But for most games, I think that some kind of AI director, and again, this does not have to be super sophisticated, like crazy AI. I think that probably if we looked at the code of the Left 4 Dead AI, it's probably pretty simple. I mean, you know, it's kind of as simple as, like, you can create some metrics for, like, the player doing well. at certain points and just ramp up or down the difficulty. Have there be more monsters, have the monsters have more health, have the monsters have, you know, more AI tools, things like that. Yeah. Spawn a health pack if they're like really low on health, you know, things like that. Yeah. I think that's good. I also think that would have this weird like secondary effect of actually, if you do it right, I think this could actually make the veneer, the fantasy, the power fantasy more believable in a way, because there's a bit of like a more of an emergent quality. Like each story that you go through is a little bit different. It feels less canned, even though it's, you know, it's actually more bumper bowling than the typical video game. It is less canned. It's actually your story and your events that's happening to you are going to be a little more unique to you and a little bit less canned, which is, I think, probably a nice thing for that. Okay. Let's address some chats. People want to believe that their game is fair, but in reality, they want to privilege them. I actually want the opposite. Part of adventure game design philosophy is to not privilege the player, maybe to actively inconvenience them. So, I mean, of course, it depends on what we mean by adventure game, but No More Birds talks about this a bit with regards to games like Dark Souls and The Legend of Zelda, the original Legend of Zelda. I know those are examples of what he considers adventure games. To not privilege the player. This is a really interesting question. Because I still think what you want in this situation. So like if you actually want to not privilege the player, then you don't want a power fantasy. But I have a hard time reconciling the idea of an adventure game and like a real power negotiation. Because like to me an adventure is a narrative concept. It's like first and foremost narrative. And whereas a real power struggle. So like I guess we could talk about this with regards to like the project games that I wrote about, the RPG, the computer RPGs. Spelunky also has that feel, and it feels very adventurous. Right, exactly. So you have like roguelikes. Okay, like so let's talk about adventure aesthetic. So we have things like roguelikes, Dark Souls, I guess the original Legend of Zelda, maybe. We'll just write 1 on there to make that clear. Because the later Zeldas became more like video games, for sure. Spelunky, I mean, that's a roguelike, pretty much. And also, I would say, like, Project CRPGs. Now, in these games, they do want to believe that their game is fair, and they don't want it to privilege them. Are adventure games not like video games? I mean, that's kind of what we're discussing here. I mean, they are video games, but like I think one of the things that made Spelunky sort of seem revolutionary to a lot of video game players is this, in fact, this exact point, that Spelunky just plays by its own rules and the player enters into it and what happens, right? Maybe there's gonna be a totally shit story where you just like, you start out and within 1 minute you just get killed by an arrow and you just die, and it's a terrible story. It's like not a good power fantasy or anything like that. And so that's very distinct, I think, from the video game power fantasy machine, right? And so this is like a totally separate aesthetic. And I think it's still video games, but it's another aesthetic of video games. And yeah, and I think that in these games, the system operates with its own rules, and which may not at all result in a good, narrative or a power fantasy. But may also, so like that's the minus. The minus is kind of is may not at all result in a good narrative or a power fantasy, but at the same time, may has the capacity to be not a power fantasy, but like a power to engage with real power, right? Because right? Because if you win in Spelunky, it's not because like you were bumper bowlinged to the end. Like that's the way the play goes. It's because of things you specifically did. You actually overcame things because of knowledge that you have. And so these kinds of adventure, I guess, games, we could call them. So like we could like sort of break these into like two kinds of systems. This would be called like the power fantasy. That's a good name for it. Video game type 1, power fantasy. And then this could be video game type 2. And I wouldn't put it as the adventure aesthetic because it's more broad than that. System. You know, like honestly, like interactive system. Like, I don't know a better way to put that, because this type can involve strategy games, it can involve contests, it can involve toys, it can involve puzzles. And it's like a super set of video games. These are ones that like the system and the rules are maintained regardless of the I guess you could say like system first, maybe. And this could be like I guess you could say narrative first, actually. That's probably the way, because like when we talk about power fantasy, we're really talking about a narrative. And yeah, so actually we're kind of back to the like the visual novel versus interactive CRPG sort of thing, right? The visual novel would certainly be in here, and the interactive CRPG would be over here, as well as all contests, any pure contest, puzzle, toy, or strategy game. Includes, I should say. In the power fantasy, you feel confident. In these types of adventure games, you feel nervous even when you do have real power or skill. Yeah, because there's no guarantee that you reach the end. Yeah. So let me put this in like its own little box here, because this is kind of like a little bit of almost like a sidebar. Yeah. With these narrative first things, style games, there is some guarantee, some amount of guarantee that the narrative will be completed, whether that's a power fantasy or any other narrative. Whereas in this one, there isn't that guarantee. Like, you can just lose, you could just die, or whatever. You could just not solve the puzzle. Yeah. So let's see. Let's get to some more chats. We did this chat. To be serious though. Oh, I thought that was serious. Something worth mentioning for this topic is the rise of sub 50% win rate games, like roguelikes, battle royales, and auto chess. Right. Yeah, and I mean, part of that's like, how do we define win rate? System first games. Let's just make these like bullet points. May have any like these have like 100% win rate, and it's actually wrong to even apply the term win to this, because you don't win in a narrative. You don't if you're an actor and you reach the end of the play that you're acting in, it's not that you've won. It's that you've completed the play. Narrative first style games endpoint should be thought of as completion rather than winning or losing. Right. And then for these guys, have any win-loss rates or states, although strategy games in particular should have a 50% win rate. And that's something, I think we did another show on that. You can probably go back and look at that for more about that. I forget if we did that on the show or the podcast, but I've definitely talked about the 50% win rate thing a few times before. GLP says, I'll note that when I said that I wasn't talking about you particularly, I was mostly talking about people who respond. Wait, what? Oh, that must be from a different chat. Yeah, I think so, but let me know. Game over and narrative mean almost nothing. Game over and system first mean everything. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, game over in narrative games, I mean, shouldn't exist, in my opinion. Like, you shouldn't have game over. It should just be like, there's no reason to put that game over screen there. Just if I die or whatever, I don't even think you should put death in these games, but if you do have death, just, if that's irrelevant to this discussion, Herbivore, just kind of like re-say it. So I'm not sure I followed it exactly. But yeah, instead of like having a game over screen, which is this weird vestigial thing, just like rewind time and let me keep playing. What is a win in PUBG? Right. I mean, there is some blurriness about winning, and that's kind of more of a strategy game critique. But I agree that that's kind of a problem, is the unclearness of a win in some of these systems. I think there's some score chasing element. You can feel good about yourself if you die later in the match. Yeah, a lot of these, I mean, and same with PUBG. I mean, the way to sort of think about this stuff, the score chasing, the PUBG, like second place, third place, all that stuff, it's operating on a toy level in a lot of ways. And you're playing with it rather than necessarily trying to win, per se. When people find out they've been playing Type 1 power fantasies when they thought they were experiencing real power, they can respond surprisingly viciously. Right. That's true. Oh, I see. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to be criticized in the obsession with power fantasy, for sure. Another thing worth bringing up, a random tidbit, is the percentage chances to hit Fire Emblem are inaccurate. They're higher than they say they are. Okay, cool. So this is a great segue into something else I wanted to talk about, because their privilege is under attack. Yeah, right. I agree. Their status as like gamers or whatever. Okay, so this is something I want to talk about, and something I've sort of been struggling with a little bit in Gem Wizard's Tactics. Maybe. I'm not sure. So we've been struggling with the combat system in Gem Wizard's Tactics, and if you don't know what that is, that's the game I've been working on that is a turn-based, like, Advanced Wars-y kind of game. And one thing that we noticed was, because originally we had like Fantasy General / Panzer General style combat, where two equal units standing on the same terrain. If I attack you, we both take the same damage, pretty much. Like, there's a little bit of randomness maybe, but like I don't have any advantage. I just attack you, and we end up having the same damage because I didn't have any terrain advantage or flanking bonus or anything like that. And one thing that we noticed was like, maybe on an aesthetic level or maybe on some kind of like UI level, there's a lot going on, so it's hard to know exactly. But on a local level, for like combat to feel good, it has to like kind of have some direct feedback, in that like you need to feel like you've done something. And I think that the percentage chances to hit are inaccurate. I think there's something here that's related of like feeling a direct connection between your inputs, like when you actually like click to make an input or press a button, and getting some kind of like actual feedback that feels like you did something. Because one of the issues with the fantasy general style combat is that if I remove 5 hit points from your unit and my unit, it's kind of like I didn't do anything, right? Because like the overall everything has just reduced by the same amount. Yeah, there is output randomness in Gem Wizard's Tactics, and we're like reworking how it works exactly. And I can definitely talk about why there is that. But let's put that aside for now. But yeah, so the thing I'm talking about here is like this connection of, you know, player input and agency, which actually is like a little bit flying in the face of, you know, some of the values of strategy games. Because like what I'm kind of saying, let me write this down so that people can follow what I'm saying here. In strategy games, you should be rewarded only for, you know, doing like smart, strategic, tactical moves. Right? On the other hand, in video games, like, it's kind of, I don't have this exactly formed, but like there is a aesthetic, like a deeply rooted expectation or aesthetic value of click, arrow sign, response, I guess you could say. Meaningful response. And I think that this is like, there's something here that's like the heart of why video games and strategy games have like an uncomfortable relationship. Right? So like on the one hand, yeah, like I want to just like click and get sweets. I want to click and get candies. On the other hand, that's fundamentally at odds with the way that a strategy game works, right? We can't have a strategy game if when you click, you get candies. Now, candies, the way that we sort of get around this is we do a lot of like art and animation and stuff, right? That game that came out, Starseed Pilgrim, or the one that, not Starseed, Star something, something, something. The new game that came out that's kind of like the Slay the Spire kind of thing with Final Fantasy combat. Anyway, that game worked really hard to make, when you click fight or whatever it is with your guy, it does these crazy like Michael Bay animations, right? Card games actually do this too. Hearthstone and Runeterra. They play all this sound and animations and explosions and stuff to kind of like, and to me it feels a little bit like papering over this issue a little bit, like trying really hard with art and aesthetics to make you think like, no, you're getting the candy, when in fact like you're not really. Mechanically, you're actually just, you know, you're doing your +1 and they're going to do their +1, right? Basically the reason I like new XCOM is because it has really good aesthetic rewards. Yeah, and so like the aesthetic rewards are important, and I think that they are part of the solution here. But I don't think that they're always the whole part of the solution. I mean, XCOM, it's not just the aesthetic rewards, right? When you click on an alien's head in XCOM, like, I mean, you can miss for sure, but misses aside, if you set up things decently well, a lot of the time when you shoot, you get the candy, right? You kill the alien. And actor removal is part of this too. Like one of the biggest candies is I headshotted the guy, right? I clicked, and so much of the value of like Counter-Strike or something is like, I'm going to go into this machine, I'm going to see a head on a guy, I'm going to click it, and I'm going to get this huge candy of their entire agency is removed. You know, like I dominated another player, The guy just got deleted, right? That's a huge candy. Aesthetics aside, like the aesthetics could suck, and indeed in 1999 they did kind of suck by today's standards, certainly at least. And even now, like when you know the guy's off in the distance, you have a sniper rifle and you shoot him, like basically the aesthetics that you get is just like some text pops up on screen saying you got to kill. Like you maybe you see him fall down, like but he's like tiny and far away. You're not seeing this big Michael Bay animation or whatever. So yeah, like the lethality is also part of it, and that's also part of what I'm sort of struggling with in Gem Wizards, where I'm really trying to like keep lethality back. I'm trying to scale down actor removal, and I think that that's something where I'm running a little bit into this. Now, part of that, of course, is I don't have the budget for like these huge effects and aesthetics and stuff, so I have to. So I'm neither able to really give people like the aesthetic candy, and also I don't want to have like one-shot kills, you know what I mean? Or anything like that even. And so I've been messing around with this a bit. I started doing the thing where, you know, you attack first and then they attack second, and they're a little bit diminished after that. We're actually going to be backing that off. So we might actually be running into this a bit more now. But yeah, I don't know. I think this is like worth, I don't have a lot more to say about this yet, but I think that this is something that needs to be thought about a lot more for people making strategy games, especially strategy games that are innovative and novel, and that are video games, and that like you're trying to like market it as a video game, and like, you know, it's not really an issue if you're just making like an art game for you and 4 or 5 friends to play with, or for just you to play with. Experimental kind of game doesn't really matter. But if you're trying to like reach an audience, you know, like Advance Wars fans, XCOM fans, it's I think this is a real struggle here. And it's a little bit related to this conversation, which is why probably No More Birds brought it up afterwards. So like a 95% chance to hit is actually a 99 or 100% chance to hit. Right. At 95, you expect to never miss, so they fudge it so that's actually the case. Right, exactly, yeah. Part of this is like you know, humans are really bad at understanding like how randomness is not very uniform. So even if you have a 95% chance to hit, you could just miss. And people don't realize that. It reminds me of like the polls and how like the polling, people always say like in 2016 the polling was wrong because it said that Hillary Clinton was really likely to win and she didn't win. Whereas that doesn't actually mean that polling was wrong. Now it may have been wrong for other reasons, but the fact that it had, even if it had Clinton at 95% and Trump won, that doesn't mean that the polling was wrong. It just meant that we got like a crazy dice roll. You know what I mean? Like we got an outlier effect. So yeah, I think that that's also, I tend to think it's worth playing into players' expectations of how randomness will work rather than using true randomness. But yeah, I think this is really interesting. I'm going to be thinking about this a lot going forward. And I'm curious if anyone else has any thoughts about this before we wrap up. Probably going to be a kind of a short show today because I have a ton of stuff to do. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. I think that I've largely covered what I wanted to say on this topic. I should also mention real quick before I sign off that we just sent out another build of Gem Wizards Tactics, the game we've been talking about. And Herbivore, I will talk to you about their output randomness in the Gem Wizards Tactics channel. We'll talk about that over on Discord. I invite everyone to come to my Discord. You can go to keithburgun.net and come and hang out. But also a new build of Gem Wizards Tactics just went out a little bit like about an hour ago, hot off the presses. And you can get that by becoming a patron at patreon.com/keithburgun. And yeah, thank you so much for your support to my patrons who make this show, my game development, and my podcast possible. We didn't have a podcast episode this month rather, but we'll be back next month. Been focusing more on the show and, of course, more on Gem Wizards. In some ways, making a game is the ultimate podcast, or the ultimate game design theory book or podcast or whatever. So yeah, thanks so much for watching and listening, and I will see you guys in the chat. And if you have any more questions, of course, I'll be there to answer them or talk to you about them. Okay, thanks for hanging out. See you next time. Oh, we got a comment just right at the end here. Is Gem Wizards going to have a ranked and a quick play mode? And if so, will quick play be random or skill-based matchmaking? So Gem Wizards is currently a one-player game. I need to make that clear right off the top of the bat. There's no current plans for multiplayer. It will have, but with that said, yes, it will have a ranked mode. A quick play mode, I'm not sure what you mean by that, but it will have like a custom game mode where you can just like play one-off with whatever rules you want. But the ranked mode will be in a sort of campaign setting where you do like a series of games, really, with the same units going over and over again. Quick play will be, I don't know what you mean by quick play or will be random. I guess it sounds like you're talking about thinking of it as a multiplayer game. But yes, this game, as well as like Oro and any game I work on, has a single player elo system. So there will be a ranked single player mode where the game, as you win more games, it gets harder. And you sort of like rank up. And yeah, that's more or less the idea. That's how we solve something like the fact that players have different skill levels. Is that we do between matches the elo, there's a single player elo mechanism, which I've written about before. If you can search Oro single player elo, you will read more about that there on Dino Farm's website. All right, well, that's about all I wanted to talk about today. Thanks for coming by, everybody. If you have more to say, I'll see you on the Discord, and I will be back again next Monday, same time, same place. See you next time.